Okay, what we're going to kind of get into here is of course, the treatment here, the addiction treatment, and how it works with DEA and diversion. I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through a little bit of explanation of what this is, how this works, and kind of hopefully kind of demystify what we do here at the DEA and kind of put you at ease and to let you do what you guys are going to be doing is treating, a population that really needs to be treated out there. So my goal is kind of just to alleviate some of that maybe some misconceptions you have of DEA, some of the law enforcement part of it that we do, and kind of put you at ease. So what I really want to kind of go through, you can kind of read these. I'm going to kind of go a little bit off script here, not really read this verbatim, but what I want to do is kind of, first of all, kind of give you the idea of what DEA is and what we really do. What is it that we do? And it's in the name. We're the Drug Enforcement Administration. So we administer a registration to the public. And what that is that's for anyone that handles controlled substance. So what it really means is that the DEA is in charge of enforcing the Controlled Substance Act. And what does that mean when we talk about that? What it really means is that we have a closed system to allow the controlled substance to get to the right person, to get to the patients, to get to the researchers, to get to the clinics that need them. So we administer a registration to those people that handle it. So the manufacturers would have to get a registration for DEA, the distributors, the pharmacies, the doctors, and so forth until the end user gets it, and then it's a closed system. So we can theoretically track those controlled substances through that system. So something that we do is from DEA is anyone that doesn't have a need to handle those controlled substances is obviously outside the law, and that's what we do. We enforce that law. If there's no need for you to have them and you're outside that system, then you're against the law. So when we start talking about DEA and you start seeing shows like Breaking Bad and you hear they're watching Narcos and we're going after the cartels, yes, well, those people do not have registrations to handle controlled substances. So of course, that's part of our job is to go after those people. That's something that's kind of very much away from what we're doing here. So what is it we're talking about here and your job? Well, we're trying to get people that need a certain controlled substance to be treated for their ailment, their addictions to opioids. And so that's what we're talking about here. You and your community, your training, you'll be allowed to treat this population with buprenorphine. So what does that mean? It means you have to come to the DEA and get that registration, and we're going to see if you're getting controlled substances. We're going to monitor that. We're going to see if you're ordering controlled substances, what controlled substances is it coming in through that system? Are you properly registered, and are you administering them properly? We're looking, all DEA is really looking at is the medicine that the controlled substance that's coming in, the medicine that's coming in, and when it's going out, and if there's been anything stolen, lost, or diverted. And I don't know if you're paying attention, I am a diversion investigator by trade at the DEA. I handle diversion investigators. So what is that? Well, we investigate a diversion of controlled substance out of that system. So that's basically what we do. So when you hear about us coming to do an audit, coming to inspect you, that's all we're doing. We're going to look at the controlled substances that you have. Are they being handled properly? Are they being safeguarded properly? And are they being diverted to an outside source illegally? That's what we're doing. And we're actually here to help you make sure that that's not happening. So today what I want to do is kind of make sure that you understand what you need to know to be in compliance with the DEA. And it's very simple. So please, if you have questions, this is the time to ask you. And also, we're just going to go over like what it really means to be a DEA registrant. And I know that kind of going through, being out there in the registrant community, a lot of the question is, and the big fear is, we're going to come and do an audit. We're going to come and audit you. And this can, I know when the government does that, I know when I've had an audit with the IRS, yeah, it's very scary. It can be kind of intimidating. I don't want this to be intimidating. I want you to understand why we're doing this and what it really means. And so our audits are at random. We don't come pick on you for any reason. It's just because you have a DEA registration and you're subject to audit. And what we're really doing is just making sure you're in compliance, that you understand what it means to, to have a DEA registration. So what will happen in this audit? Well, we'll show up. We're going to ask, if you're a DEA registrant, we're going to ask, that we're going to tell you that we're there. We're going to show you our ID. We're going to ask for certain records to see if you're ordering controlled substances. And basically, we're just going to go through that. We're going to audit your controlled substances. If you have ordered controlled substances, we're going to see, all right, you've ordered so many, and you have so many on hand, and how many went out the door, and were the record keeping proper? That's all we're really going to do. Try to keep this as simple as possible. So we're going to inspect basically the drugs, what you ordered, and what went out. We're going to look at the paperwork to make sure the paperwork is annotated properly. And the reason we're doing that, and you can see here where it says inspect paperwork for an X number. If you're going to be treating with buprenorphine with an X number, what that means is that you're going to have a special DEA number with an X on it. That DEA registration with an X on it is only for that treatment. It's only for that particular drug. So what we're looking at is that if you have a DEA number for other types of prescriptions, that cannot be used to treat addiction. Only your X number. So we're just going to make sure that you're doing that. That's basically it. We're going to ask to see the drugs you have on hand that you're distributing, that you're giving your patients. If there is no drugs on hand, our visit is going to be very short and simple. At that point, we really don't have anything to look at, because our job is to kind of enforce the controlled substances. And if you don't have any controlled substances at your location, we're just going to probably go over and make sure that you understand what it means to have an X number, that you're going to be using that X number just for prescriptions for addiction. And kind of, if you have any questions at that point, we'll answer them. But if you have no drugs, we really have no reason to be there, and we'll be done fairly quickly. So like I just said, I mean, when we come and do these audits, it's the way we should probably look at them is probably maybe not call them maybe an audit. I mean, I know that's what it is, but it's an opportunity to learn. And really what I like to do, and I instruct my investigators to do is this is fairly new processes, these data wave registrations. So let's take the opportunity to educate the registration population. So take this opportunity. If we come and do an audit, this is a really good chance for you guys to really ask us these questions. And what's going on. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions out there about how many patients they can have, how that works, why that works. That if you guys decide to order drugs, what kind of safety issues there are, what kind of security you may need, may want, and we'll be there to kind of assist you in that. So use us at that time, and to just take the opportunity to ask those questions. So, and then one of the other things is, what if we're not in compliance? Well, we're going to try to get you back into compliance. We're probably going to look at your paperwork and say you're not annotating correctly, you're not doing certain things. We're really going to try, the first time we go out there, is to try and get you into compliance, to try and say, this is the type of paperwork you're going to need. You're going over your limits with patients, you're going to have to cut back. This is really what it means to have 30 patients, 60 patients, or however many you're registered for. And we're just going to go through that. And we're not going to hammer you the first time. But if it continues, or if it's egregious, then there might be some other actions. But it really should never get to that level with this registration population. I mean, we really want you out there. We really need you out there doing what you're doing. So we're just going to try and keep you in compliance. And I think everyone here wants to be in compliance. So it's a very simple task. We're going to probably, if it's really bad, we'll probably issue you a letter saying, here, this is the recommendations. You're going to have to get into compliance, and we'll come back and take a look and make sure that you're following that. And hopefully that's where it ends. I mean, yes, it can get up to the point of civil fines, and worse, but I really don't see it ever kind of getting to that. You want to chime in and kind of?
Sure. So our office, we have, I'm in charge of the criminal side. We do have a civil side as well. You may have had exposure with us in terms of medical malpractice defense. If you are involved with a provider, that we would then provide you a defense. So in that same civil section, they would be the ones that would assist with the issuance of a civil fine. Ruth Keegan is the Assistant United States Attorney who is spearheading that. And, you know, really the ones I've looked at so far that get to Ruth's level are not people who are taking time out of their lunch hour to participate in this program. There have been numerous letters of reprimand, numerous meetings, people who are just completely disregarding the rules and posing major concern, but not necessarily to a criminal level. So typically what we have found is that the issuance of a civil fine is one that tends to get more attention than the letter and the meetings, and particularly for some of these just really poorly run clinics, if you can call them that. And so that is not you all. And you would have so many opportunities before we would ever get involved to correct anything. So to the extent that there's any concern out there that the U.S. Attorney's Office is swooping in and going to be interfering with your practices, that just doesn't happen. And if it is to the level where you know, Jake or Nick or someone else is coming to me to get them in touch with the civil people, you would be very much on notice.
Yeah, you would have traveled a long road of not being in compliance before we get to that point. And so I guess the takeaway here is that we're not out there trying to get you, trying to find things that are wrong. We're actually out there to try and help you. And sometimes we understand, especially with government rules and regulations, it can be a little tricky and very hard sometimes to understand. Well, that's where we come in, and like I said, it's an opportunity when we come in and do an audit is to ask those questions. And if honestly we understand that and we want to get you into compliance, but if it keeps going down that road, yes, it can lead to something, but I really don't see that happening. Okay, so the prescription monitoring program, that's not something that DEA kind of runs. That's here in the state. And it's just, I'm sure you know that some of those things, it's a good tool, but don't really rely on it is kind of what we're saying here. You should, but when I say it's a good tool, what you should do in your field is kind of use it to check, kind of like you would check your credit account. Run your own DEA registration against it to see if someone is using your number. That's what we kind of say, and check it to see your clients if they're kind of not telling you the truth. That's where it kind of comes into a very good tool to use. We kind of tell you not to, to kind of help you with your audits and to kind of help us with the audits, but we don't really rely on it because it's one of those systems that what's put into it is what's gotten out to it in the community out there. So sometimes all the information is not put into it, so we really can't rely on it. But it is a good tool, and I highly recommend that registrants out there run the registration number every once in a while to kind of check on it too. We've had some registrants out there have been very surprised, like, wow, someone's got a hold of my number, I wasn't writing these. And as soon as you find that out, you can come to us and talk to it, and we can kind of take a look at what's going on and get it corrected.
Yeah, we actually have a case in our office right now. It's a criminal case with a dentist who just went to a presentation, heard about PMP, ran his registration, and it turned out that his office manager had been liberally prescribing all sorts of stuff. So she is set to be sentenced next month. So I think, in terms of how useful it is for you guys doing your job, I don't know. But I can tell you, I do think it's a very good idea to run it, and then definitely report any unauthorized use to the DEA.
Because it does happen, and please, guard your DEA number just like you would your checking account number or your credit card number, because there are people that are out there looking for those numbers to write false prescriptions, and just run this every once in a while to check on yourself. This comes up a lot, I know, and hopefully we can kind of I can kind of explain this is patient limits. I know that there's, it can be up to 275. We don't set those limits, and we just respect them. You go to SAMHSA to get those limits. But I know the question is what's considered an active patient. And so when you write a prescription, that's your patient till the end of that prescription, if that should make sense. So if you have a patient and you write a 30-day prescription, those 30 days, that's your patient. Once that prescription ends, then they're no longer your patient. So that's kind of how you should count your patients. So if your limit's 30 and you have 30 prescriptions out there, you're at your limit. So I think that was one of the major questions that I always get, and I ask around, and that seems to be kind of the question that keeps coming up. If there's other questions about that, at the end we'll have a question and answer. Okay, these are the pitfalls. Is it legal to prescribe via telemedicine? Prescribing with multiple state licenses shouldn't affect DEA numbers. Possible to have multiple DEA numbers for every state. Okay, some of these telemedicine, it is legal to prescribe via telemedicine. Prescribing with multiple state licenses shouldn't affect your X number. We're looking at DEA registrations, and the way to look at your DEA registration, it is only for that registered location. So if you go to a different state, you cannot use that location. That has to be at that second location. So if you're here in New Mexico and you want to go to Colorado, you're going to have to get either you transfer your DEA registration to Colorado for that new location, or you're going to have to get another DEA registration for Colorado. I hope that kind of makes sense. But you have to. The best way to look at it is your DEA registration is for that location. We're actually registering the location, not really the person. Even though it's under your name, it's the location because that's where the drugs are going to be. And going back to the beginning, what we're really looking at is where the drugs are. Okay, there are no DEA requirements to refer behavioral health. Yeah, we're not, DEA doesn't really get into the referral of that. So, again, kind of just remember what our role is. Our role is controlled substances and the security and safety of those. Okay. And so, yes, the X number is for writing those, only for those prescriptions for addiction purposes. And you have to put that just like you would on any other prescription, that if it's for that particular addiction, you have to put the X number if that's what it's for. And that's how we're going to differentiate, how many patients you have. We're going to look at those prescriptions with the X number on them.
All right, so I just wanted to take a couple minutes. I know I talked briefly earlier about the civil fines, to explain a little bit about what we do as federal prosecutors and what we're looking for. And really, the idea behind this is so you all know that we're not going out there trying to find people who are providing medical care in an appropriate and responsible fashion. You would be shocked at the cases we get referred to us and the standard of care that occurs. And so, the oath, first do no harm. By the time it comes to us, a lot of what we're reviewing at the criminal side is this person practicing medicine or are they a drug trafficker? And we have had a handful of cases that we have prosecuted over the last couple of years where the answer was they are a drug trafficker. Doctor, I'm in pain. Where does it hurt? Where do you want it to hurt? For example, that was one of the undercover reportings we had. There's been cases, I think it was in Florida, where they brought in an x-ray of a dog instead of their actual x-ray. Basically doing things that are so egregious and so out there that the standard that we have to meet beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is not practicing medicine really at all, but they are a drug trafficker. Unfortunately, it does happen. But they are rare cases. Specific to your community, In the 10 years I have been doing this work for the U.S. Attorney's Office, I can't think of a single time we've had even a, not just prosecuted, but I don't think a data wave provider has been presented to us for prosecution. We've had a couple of investigations where there's maybe a clinic, and then inside that clinic there was someone who was off on their own, but we weren't focused on the data wave provider. It was someone who was embedded, not doing the actual treatment. So we are not in this to try to focus on that by any means when it comes to criminal or civil, really, for that matter. What we're trying to do is make sure that providers are basically discharging their oath and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so really why I'm here and my understanding of how I can contribute to this conversation, because I know nothing about patient limits and everything else, is that we are here to help keep our community safe by prosecuting practitioners who abuse their oath and use their medical license or nurse practitioner license, their registration, to harm our communities. And that is what I do. And that's why I love my job, because you're never going to want to see me again, and you never will. And it's the people who are really harming our communities. And a lot of what we do, I would say 90% of my day are drug traffickers that are, fentanyl and heroin and meth, But these cases are so important, even though they're rare, because people have specialized training. You have access. You have people who trust you in your communities to make good decisions. And so when you have an abuse of that trust and an abuse of that oath, that's who I love going after. And I think they're very important cases to bring, but they're very rare. And so I don't want you to be worried or concerned that if you have an interest getting into more treatment, that there's ever a chance that we're going to come after you and try to prosecute you. That's just not our focus.
Yeah, and just kind of following up on that too. I mean, as a provider, I mean, you have the training. We're trained to kind of make sure that drugs are not being diverted, not being stolen, not being sold on the streets, and harming our communities. That's my role, and secondary, my role is making sure that those controlled substances are getting to the right people, which is you're the provider, and we want you to be able to have access to this because it is needed. Your role is vital to the community, and it's a very, very, very important role in this day and age right now. So we're here to let you work, to get you to work. We're going to stand out of your way and let you work. I mean, my role, I mean, I got some numbers here. There's 17,000 registrants in New Mexico, in my area of responsibility. I can only focus on those people that are really doing the harm, that are really just straight up drug dealers in our community. And that's not you. You're actually on the other end, you're helping, you're on our side, and we want to keep you there and get you working and get you everything you need. So we're not here to come after you, we're here to help you.
And I would add that you all are the ones in your own communities that if you have concerns about providers, that you should not hesitate to contact the DEA. We've gotten some very good referrals that way over the last couple of years. And so I would actually encourage you, if you have someone on your radar, particularly if it's a patient that comes to you and you start looking at what the last practitioner had done and you run that patient's PMP, that can be very good for our law enforcement function of trying to figure out who is the one that is doing the most harm.
Yeah, and like it says here, it depends on state regulation. It's not up to DEA. Yes, a lot of these regulations at the state level, that's where it is. That's for your job. Our job, like I said, is just for the drug, the controlled substance. That's what we're looking at. And so that's, I think, I should have my own question. I just have a question.
Yeah, no.
But and one thing that we like to do when we talk to, what I like to ask for, is you guys are in a unique position to understand what's going on out there in the community. You are really the frontline warriors of this drug epidemic, and like Shannon was saying, you know, that you guys are going to have information from your patients on what's really going on out there. And it's really going to help DEA in the long run do our job to help fight this problem from what we do is in the law enforcement end. And sometimes you're on the front lines seeing the new trends. And it may be something as simple as, you know, we know that for example, methamphetamine is really coming back in the community. There's a lot of these pills out there that are fake that are coming in, but if we could just get some of that information, that really helps us. And it might be something as simple as, well, now, you know, the heroin has turned into pills, or the heroin is not tar anymore, it's actually powder. Something as simple of information like that can really help us to know what's going on, where is it coming from, and what's out there in the streets, because that we feed that into our intelligence community, and it goes back, and we can really know what's going on and who's really harming our communities. So what I'm asking for is cooperation between DEA and you all out there, and kind of look at it like that. You know, we're here to help you just kind of stay in compliance and do the right thing, but we're also asking for help from you so we can know what's going on out there in the communities, and we can really target our fight. I think now if we have any other questions, we can really get into that. This is the important part, I think.